In March 2019, a cataloguing team at the Penn Museum reopened a drawer of Nippur fragments excavated in 1893 and never fully read. One piece, logged as a damaged hymn, was not a hymn. Epigraphist Samuel Kessler began transliteration that same week and stopped on the third line. The text did not praise a god. It described a procedure. Humans were not born on this tablet. They were fashioned, batch by batch, from clay drawn out of the Abzu, built to carry the labour the gods refused. And the first version, the tablet says, was rejected, and this is why. The fragment had a catalogue number, N4517, assigned in 1893 and not revisited for 126 years. It came out of the Penn Museum's Nippur collection, one of roughly 30,000 tablets and pieces recovered from the temple precinct of Enlil during the expeditions of the 1890s. Most were never read. There were too many and too few people who could read them. Samuel Kessler was not looking for anything unusual. He was photographing damaged pieces for a digitization grant, logging condition, measuring moving on. N4517 was logged in the old card index as a hymn fragment, badly abraded, low priority. He almost did not turn it over. When he did, the reverse was cleaner than the obverse, and the reverse was not a hymn. Kessler began a preliminary transliteration that same week. He expected a known composition. Nippur produced many copies of the same literary texts. Used to train scribes, and a damaged duplicate of an existing myth would be unremarkable. He compared the opening lines against the standard catalogue. They did not match. He widened the comparison. Still nothing. By the third line, he had stopped expecting a match because the text was not doing what literary texts do. It was not invoking. It was not praising. It was recording. The opening establishes a problem. The text says the igigi, the working gods, the ones who laboured, had been digging the rivers for a length of time the tablet measures not in years but in shifts. The word is sigbi, the burden of the day, repeated. They dug the Tigris, they dug the Euphrates, they piled the excavated earth into mountains, and then, in a line Kessler read 4 times before accepting it, they stopped. The verb is gnashing of teeth in most translations of the related atrahasis tradition. On this tablet the verb is different. The word is shubal, to throw down, to set aside. They set down their baskets. They set down their digging tools. The tablet does not describe a war or a rebellion in the heroic sense. It describes a refusal of work, a labour force that calculated the load and decided the load was unbearable, and stopped. This is where most people expect a creation story to begin with light, or breath, or a word spoken into emptiness. This tablet begins with a logistics failure. The text names who responds, not the chief god directly. The first to act is Nammu. In the Sumerian tradition, Nammu is the primeval water, the mother who existed before the upper and lower worlds were separated, and she is associated specifically with the Abzu, the body of fresh water beneath the earth. The tablet describes her going to Enki, who is asleep in the deep, and waking him. Phrase is precise. She does not pray to him, she informs him. The text says she carried to him the tears of the gods, meaning their complaint, their grievance, and she instructs him to act. And the instruction is the line that made Kessler stop photographing and start taking notes by hand. Nammu tells Enki to make a substitute. The Sumerian is kingalak, which breaks into pieces that can be read separately. Kin means work or task or commission. Gal can mean great, but in this construction functions closer to one who bears. Ak is the verb to make, to do, to fashion. Read together, the term is not man, not human, not person. The term is the one made to bear the commission. A made thing whose defining property is the work it carries, not a child of the gods, a replacement for them. Kessler flagged the term and moved on because the next lines told him how. The text says Enki, still in the Abzu, calls for the clay, not earth in general. The word is clay, but it is qualified. The clay is taken from the top of the Abzu, the surface layer of the deep water, the boundary where the fresh water beneath the earth meets the ground above it. This is not a casual detail. In Sumerian cosmology, the Abzu is Enki's own domain, the source of fresh water, wisdom, and the underground reservoir that fed the rivers and the wells. The being is to be made from the substance of the place the working gods had spent their shifts trying to control, the clay of the water they were digging toward. And the clay alone is not enough. The tablet specifies a second component, and the second component is where the language turns careful, almost guarded. The text says the clay must be mixed. The word for what it is mixed with is partially abraded on N45-1C, but the surviving signs point to the substance of a god, a divine element added to the clay to animate it. In the related atrahasis tradition, this element is the blood of a slain god mixed with clay, and the resulting humans carry a divine component, a kind of inherited spirit, from that moment. Whatever the abraded sign on this tablet originally read, the structure is the same, clay plus a divine substance, a material base and an activating agent, a recipe. Kessler wrote a single word in the margin of his notes that week, and he has never explained it on record. The word was protocol, because that is what the first column reads like, not a myth of origin, a protocol. A problem stated in operational terms, a decision made by a named authority. A material specified, a second ingredient added under controlled conditions, and a stated objective. The objective is repeated twice in the surviving text, in case the reader missed it the first time. The being is made so that the gods may rest, so that the load may be carried by another, so that the ones who set down their baskets never have to pick them up again. The tablet has not yet described what happened when the recipe was used. It has not described the first beings, or how many, or what they were like, or what went wrong. That comes later, and it does go wrong. For now, the first column does only one thing. It establishes, in the flat register of an administrative record, that according to this text, humanity was not born and was not loved into being. Humanity was commissioned, built to a specification, for a purpose that had nothing to do with us and everything to do with the gods who no longer wanted to dig the rivers. The second column does not begin with the result. It begins with the method, and the method is where Kessler spent most of the next 3 months. The verb the tablet uses for the act of making is not the verb for giving birth. Sumerian has that verb. It is to bear, to deliver, and it appears in hundreds of texts about gods and kings and ordinary women. This tablet does not use it. The word here is sig-en, which means to pinch off, to mould, to press into shape with the hands. It is the verb a potter uses. It is the verb for shaping clay on a working surface, not the verb for a body emerging from another body. The distinction is not poetic. The scribe had both words available and chose the one that means manufacture. And the manufacture is not performed alone. The tablet names assistants. Enki directs. But he does not shape with his own hands. The text says the clay is given to a circle of birth goddesses, the Dingir Shasuru, the womb goddesses, 7 of them, who stand around the working surface while Ninmah supervises the shaping. 7 assistants. The number is stated plainly, and Kessler noted it because the number 7 returns later in the text in a context he was not yet ready to read. For now, it is simply a count. 7 pairs of hands around a table, and the clay between them. The recipe is restated here more completely than in the first column. The clay of the Abzu is the base. The divine substance is the activator. But the second column adds a third element the first column omitted, and the third element is the one that unsettled Kessler most. The text says that before the shaping begins, the clay is mixed with something rendered as shah, which can mean heart, interior, or core, a binding component. The clay does not animate on its own, and the divine substance does not animate on its own. The two are joined by a third thing, the shah, the core, and only then does the mixture hold the shape that is pressed into it. Base material, activating agent, binding core. 3 components, listed in order, the way an instruction lists steps that must not be reversed. Then the tablet describes the shaping itself, and here the register stays flat. There is no wonder in the lines. The womb goddesses press the mixture. Ninmah speaks the measure, meaning she sets the proportions, calls the form, names what each shaped thing is to become. The text uses a phrase Kessler translated as she fixed the destiny upon it, where destiny is Nam, the assigned function, the role a thing is locked into at the moment of its making. Every shaped being receives its Nam, every being is told at the working surface what it is for, and the first beings hold. The tablet is direct about this. The mixture takes the shape, the forms stand, the text says they rose, and that they took up the basket, and they went to the canal. There is no description of awakening, no first breath, no opening of eyes. There is only function. They were made and then they worked. The igigi who had set down their tools watched the made ones pick the tools up. The load transferred. The rivers were dug again, but not by gods. The tablet lists the work in the same vocabulary it used for the god's labour in the first column, and the repetition is deliberate. Sigby, the burden of the day, the same phrase. Except now the burden belongs to the made ones. They carry the baskets, they clear the canals, they pile the earth into mountains. The exact tasks the gods refused are now performed by beings built specifically to perform them, and the tablet notes, without comment, that the made ones do not refuse. They do not calculate the load. They do not set anything down. They were given a nam, and their nam is to carry, and so they carry. This is the moment the first column was building toward. The substitute works. The problem stated at the opening, a labour force that stopped, is solved by a labour force that cannot stop, because stopping was never written into its function. Kessler underlined the implication in his notes and did not elaborate. The made ones were not freed from the load. They were the load's new owners, by design. And then the gods celebrate. The tablet shifts here, and the shift is the first crack in the flat administrative tone. The text describes a feast. Enki and Ninmah and the gods who had been relieved of their labour gather, and there is beer, and the word for the drinking is generous, repeated, almost boastful. They drink to the success of the work. They drink because the rivers are dug and no god had to dig them. The made ones are not at the feast. The made ones are at the canal. The gods who no longer labour raise cups to the beings who now labour in their place, and the cups are full. And the text says the hearts of the gods were good, meaning content, meaning satisfied. Kessler flagged the feast for a specific reason. In the structure of the tablet, the feast is the high point of the god's fortune. The crisis is over. The solution holds. Everything the first column set out to fix has been fixed. By every measure internal to the text, this is the ending a creation story would choose. The moment of rest and celebration after the work of making is done. A myth would stop here. A hymn would stop here. This tablet does not stop here. Because the feast is also where the drinking goes too far, and the third column, the one Kessler had not yet cleaned when he wrote the word protocol in his margin, begins with two of the makers, full of beer, deciding to test the limits of the method that had just saved them. They had proven they could build a worker that functioned. The feast asks a different question. Not whether they could make a being that worked, whether they could make a being that did not, and what they would do with it once they had. The second column ends with the cup still raised. The makers do not yet know what they are about to attempt. Only the scribe knew where the next column went, recording it afterward. The wager is stated in 2 lines. Ninmah says she can make the body of a man good or bad as she pleases, and that the destiny, the Nam, follows from the maker's hand. Enki answers that he can make the destiny good or bad regardless of the body. The dispute is not about whether a being can be flawed. Both makers agree it can. The dispute is about who controls the outcome, the one who shapes the clay, or the one who assigns the function. They drink again, and they decide to settle it the only way the tablet seems to consider valid, by making things and seeing what happens. Ninmah goes first. She takes the clay and she does not make a worker. She makes flaws, deliberately, one after another. And the tablet lists them with the same flat precision it used for the canal labour. 6 beings. Kessler counted them twice. She made one who could not bend its hands, whose fingers would not close. She made one who could not hold back its urine, whose body would not seal. She made one whose eyes were covered, who could not see the light. She made one whose feet would not carry it, who could not stand or walk. She made one whose breath came wrong, who weakened at any exertion. She made one who was neither male nor female, whose body held no function of generation. 6 defects, 6 bodies, each one a being that by the standard of the first column should have no place. A worker that cannot grip, a worker that cannot see, a worker that cannot stand. By the logic that built the made ones, these are failures, rejected units, clay that did not take the shape it was supposed to take. And then Ninmah turns to Enki and tells him to do what he claimed he could. Find them a destiny, decree the bread of each one, give the failures a function. This is the part of the tablet that Kessler said he read more carefully than anything else, because Enki does not hesitate, and he does not fail. For each broken being, he names a place. To the one whose hands would not close, he gave a position beside the king, an attendant, a server who did not need to grip to serve. To the one whose body would not seal, he performed an act the text describes as a cleansing, a treatment, and assigned it a role regardless. To the one who could not see, he gave the gift of music, the making of song, a place of honour in the court where sight was not the measure of worth. To the one whose feet would not carry it, he gave the work of the silver smith, the worker who sits, whose craft is in the hands and not the legs. To the one whose breath came wrong, he assigned a destiny suited to its limits. To the one who was neither male nor female, he gave a place in the service of the palace, a standing that did not depend on generation. 6 failures, 6 destinies, every rejected unit placed. The point Ninmah was trying to prove collapses. She had made beings she believed were unusable, and the other maker had made every one of them usable by decree. The body did not fix the destiny. The destiny was assigned over the body around it in spite of it. Enki had answered the wager. He could make the function good no matter how bad the clay. And here the tablet does something that Kessler said changed the way he read the whole text. Enki does not stop at winning. He proposes the reverse. Now I will make, he says, and you will find the destiny. The challenger becomes the maker. The one who assigned functions will now shape the clay, and the one who shaped the clay will now have to assign the function. The wager flips, and the flip is where it goes wrong. Enki takes the clay. The tablet does not describe his work as careful. It describes it as the work of a maker who has been drinking and is making a point. What he produces is named in the text. The word is umul. Kessler rendered it as the day my distant day, a phrase tied to edge, to the far end of life, to a body at the limit of its decline. The umul is not one defect. It is all of them at once. Its head is weak, its eyes are failing, its hands shake, its lungs labour, its spine will not hold it, it cannot eat without help, it cannot stand without help, it cannot live without another being constantly tending to it. The tablet is unsparing in the listing. The umul has no single function that is broken. It is a being for which function itself does not apply. Enki sets it before Ninmah and tells her to do what he did, find its destiny, decree its bread, give it a place, and she cannot. The tablet records her attempts, and each one fails. She approaches the umul, she speaks to it, and it does not answer. She offers it bread, and it cannot take the bread. She tries to assign it work, and there is no work it can perform, no court it can serve in, no craft it can sit and do, no role that its body permits in any form. Everything Enki had done for her 6, she tries to do for his 1, and the umul defeats every attempt. There is no place for it. The text says she could not. Plainly, she could not. What had been a contest becomes something colder. Ninmah turns on Enki. The tablet preserves her words in fragments, and the fragments are bitter. She says the being he made is not fit to live among the made ones. She says his hand has produced something that should not have been shaped. The mood of the feast is gone. The cups are not mentioned again. 2 makers stand over a being that one of them built and neither of them can use, and the warmth that filled the hall after the rivers were dug has drained completely out of the text. The mole lies between them, breathing, needing, useless, and alive. And the tablet, a record of problems stated and problems fixed, arrives at the one thing the makers cannot solve and goes quiet. The scribe records the silence, does not fill it. The tablet does not end with the umul. Kessler spent his last months on the lines that follow the silence, and those lines are why he stopped describing the text as a myth at all. What the third column documents stripped of its gods is a process no creation story should contain, a labour problem solved by manufacturing workers, a worker built from a base material, an activating agent and a binding core to a fixed specification, with the function written in at the moment of assembly, a working prototype, then a series of deliberately altered builds, 6 of them, each carrying a single defined defect. Then a final build carrying every defect at once, a being so degraded it could not be assigned any function and could not survive without constant support, and a maker who declared that build a failure and could find no use for it. Kessler's note on this section is one line. He wrote that the sequence does not read like theology, it reads like a development log written by someone with access to the results, because that is the shape of it, not the inspired creation of life, the iteration of a product. Establish a working prototype, vary one parameter at a time and record the result. Push the parameters to the extreme and document the point of failure. Discard the unit that cannot perform. This is not how any culture imagined its gods making people. It is how a modern engineer describes refining a design, and the correspondence is close enough that Kessler refused to write it down for almost 2 years. He was careful about the limits. He did not claim the tablet describes genetic engineering. He did not claim the divine substance was DNA, or that the clay was a growth medium. He said only that the logic of the text, the stage builds, the single variable defects, the assigned functions, the documented failure point, matches the logic of a design process and matches no other creation account in the comparative record. Not the breath of life in Genesis, not the moulding in the Egyptian tradition where a god shapes a person and a soul together as one whole act, not the Greek account where a single being is fashioned and then gifted fire, not any flood and remake story where humanity is wiped and restarted as a moral correction. Those are single acts of making. This is a sequence of revisions, and a sequence of revisions implies something the text never states, that someone was learning, that the makers did not know in advance exactly what they would get, and were finding out build by build the way you find out what a process can and cannot produce only by running it. The detail Kessler said a Bronze Age scribe could not have invented is not the gods and not the clay, it is the Ummuel. Every symptom the tablet assigns to the umul, the failing eyes, the shaking hands, the labouring lungs, the spine that will not hold, the inability to eat or stand or live without constant care, is a coherent and accurate description of profound developmental and degenerative impairment. The scribe did not describe a monster. He described precisely a body that does not work in clinical terms without exaggeration. And he placed it at the end of a sequence of single defect builds as the case where every variable failed at once. That ordering is not mythological instinct. That ordering is what you get when someone is cataloguing outcomes. What Kessler did next is the part that has no clean explanation. He completed his transliteration and circulated it to 3 colleagues in late 2021, one at the Oriental Institute in Chicago, one at the British Museum, one at Leiden. The Chicago colleague replied that the join was interesting and the readings plausible and suggested cautious publication. The British Museum colleague asked, before anything else, for high-resolution images and the exact accession history of N451 The Leiden colleague did not reply for 2 months, and then sent 4 sentences advising that the fragment be re-examined for modern tooling marks before any claim was attached to it. In early 2022, the Penn Museum was reclassified N451. It was moved from the general study collection into a restricted category requiring curatorial approval for access, the same tier used for objects under provenance review. A fragment logged as a low-priority hymn for 126 years was, within months of being read correctly, placed behind a door. Kessler was asked to route further work through a committee that convenes on no fixed schedule. His digitization grant did not have its imaging rights renewed for that object, and the catalogue entry was quietly amended to read provenance under review. Whether his photographs still exist outside the museum's own files is not known. The transliteration has not been published. The 3 colleagues have not written about it. Kessler has not spoken on the record, and the 4 people who have read the full text in sequence have not attached their names to any interpretation of what it describes, because every interpretation leads somewhere a career does not return from. If the sequence is a development log, the question is who was developing. If the defects were deliberate trials, the question is what they were trying to optimize. If the UMOL was the failure case, the question is what the success case was meant to do, and whether we are looking at the record of its making from the inside. The tablet does not answer. It does what the scribe did with everything else. It records, it states the labor problem, names the maker, lists the 3 components, describes the working build, enumerates the 6 altered builds and their assigned functions, documents the final build and its failure, and then stops, the way a log stops when the entry is complete and the next one has not been written yet. He did not editorialize, he did not interpret. He pressed it into clay, and the clay outlasted the city, the language, the gods, and the 126 years it spent in a drawer, marked as something else. The fragment is in Philadelphia. The transliteration is in 4 private files. The reclassification happened within months of the reading. The colleagues have gone quiet. 4 readers, no published word. And the text, made from the same material it describes the gods using, sits behind its door and waits, the way it waited before, for someone to decide that the silence around it has lasted long enough.